Today we're going to talk about scheduled maintenance, what you can do for yourself, and save some money. So stay tuned. Congratulations on your new motorcycle. I know you're really excited about it, but at the same time, if this is your first bike, you might be nervous about anything that has to happen to the bike maintenance-wise, because you want to make sure that you take care of it and it's going to last you for a long time, because for a lot of people, it's an investment and it's a big one anytime you purchase a new motorcycle. So today we're going to talk about what you can do yourself as far as scheduled maintenance goes, and save some time and money, and you'll get more satisfaction in the long run just knowing that you've done it yourself and you can take care of your own motorcycle. So a lot of manufacturers recommend that you bring the bike in for its first service around 600 to 1,000 miles, and that varies by manufacturer. The Kawasaki was recommended around 600 miles. Now I do personally recommend taking the bike back in for the first service to the dealership, just for the simple fact that most good and reputable dealerships are going to go through and check to make sure everything is torqued down, tight, and still within spec of where it should have been when they sold you the bike. Also, a lot of times when you purchase a brand new bike, you will get a voucher or at least a discount or a coupon to bring the bike back in for first service. And a lot of times you can get by with only having to pay for the oil and the filter, and they'll actually eat the labor just because they want you to come back in repeatedly for future service. Now for some people, they'll care nothing about doing their own maintenance on their bike, and that's fine. If that's the kind of person you are, then excellent. Me personally, I like working on things. I like doing my own maintenance. So let's talk about what you can do yourself and how easy it is to maintain your bike and still keep it within your factory warranty, where if you do experience any issues, it'll be covered. Now here I've got the owner's manual for the Z650, and we're going to go over the particular specs and the scheduled service for this bike, talk about what they recommend the dealership does and what you need to do. In my previous video on do this before you ride, we talk about checking your tires, your fluids, the basics, and you do need to do that before every ride for your own safety. But this is going to be related to oil changes, bearing inspection, chain slack adjustment, things of that nature, which a lot of times the dealer recommends you bring it to them, but you can do it yourself very easily. Okay, air cleaner element says it needs to be changed by the dealership every 18 months or 11,000 miles. Well, to get to the air filter on these bikes, you have to remove the tank and the air box. I have a video on that, and it's not as hard as you think. If you attempt to do this by yourself, make sure that you are almost empty on the fuel tank before you try to remove it, just to alleviate some of the weight. But it's very simple to do. Here's the link to that video if you want to check it out. Super simple to get to. And you can also use that video to see how to change the coil packs and the plugs. Once you pull the air box out, those are right there as well. Really easy. Idle speed. Check that every 6 months. Well, the newer bikes are computer controlled fuel injection. You really don't have to worry about the idle speed getting put out. On the older bikes that were carbureted, you had to worry about idle speed adjustments, the jets getting clogged, the vacuum you had to keep. If you had twin carburetors, you had to keep them synchronized through the vacuum. That's really not something that you should go out of your way to really check. I mean, you'll know if you're stopped and the bike's idling, if it's idling fast. On this bike, I think it's around 1,200 to 1,500 RPMs is the idle speed. So just keep an eye on that through your day-to-day driving. Throttle control system, play, smooth, return, or no drag. It says check it every 6 months. Okay? If your throttle's not smooth, you're going to know it. That's something else that you'll pick up immediately. If you install bar-end mirrors, especially on the throttle side, if you do not have it spaced off properly, you will cause hanging. You can check that turn the throttle back, and release. This bike has a throttle servo when you turn the ignition off. If you gently lay your hand on the throttle, you will feel it going forward and then back to go back to zero position on the throttle servos. So that's an easy way to check that. Engine vacuum synchronization. Check it every year. Now, I'm not too sure about the fuel injected computer controlled bikes like most are now. That is a big thing to check on carbureted engines. I would not think you have to worry about vacuum synchronization too much on a fuel injected bike. I could be wrong, but I don't think you really have to worry about that one too much. Fuel system, check that every year. Now you can go buy a cheap fuel pressure meter. You can go in and put that in between the line, turn the ignition on, and it will tell you how many PSI of fuel pressure you have. Typically, checking it every year is a little crazy, but again, that's what they recommend, and that is also listed to do by the dealership, but you can do that yourself with a simple fuel pressure gauge. Fuel filter, changed by the dealer every 2 years or 15,000 miles. That is also something that you can do fairly easy. It's right under the tank. Once you have changed the air filter, it'll be very simple to change the fuel filter. It's a little canister that's attached right under the tank. Super easy to get to, not a big problem. Save yourself a lot of time and money and change it yourself. Fuel hose, it says change that from the dealer every 5 years. If you store the bike inside, this should not be an issue either. Now, if you keep the bike out in the weather a lot, that's when you really need to keep an eye on your fuel hoses. You can check those very easily by taking your fingers and just squeezing the tube, and it should feel very stiff. Not so far as where it's completely hard, but you want a little bit of give. And also, when you take your fingers off of the hose, you want no black residue. If you can rub the hose and black residue comes off, it's time to change that. Again, if you are able to remove the tank and change the air filter yourself, you can change the fuel hoses because everything is right there, simple to get to. Evaporative emission control system, checked by the dealership. This is for California models only. Something I don't personally have to deal with here on the East Coast. So that's basically the emissions inspection you're required to get every year. Coolant level, you should check that before you ride every single day. It's super simple. On this bike, there's a sight glass. I can check it, make sure it's between the proper levels. If I have any doubt, I can pop the fuel cap and look at it there. Coolant system needs to be checked. It says at least once a year by the dealership. For a lot of riding, check it every 7,000 miles. Okay, to check the coolant system, basically what you want to do is pop the cap off, stick your finger down in there and pull you a little bit of sample out and just look at it. If it seems like it's milky or brown or extremely watery, take your bike in for service and have them look at it, or you need a coolant flush. You can do that yourself. I've not explored on where the drain hoses are on this bike. I don't know if it's on the bottom of the radiator or if it's actually somewhere else on the block. Typically everything drains from the radiator and then you flush it out with a distilled water. Do not use tap water because that can cause contamination and corrosion. Coolant, water hose, and O-ring. Again, it says to check this every 3 years by the dealership or 22,500 miles. That's going to be along the same lines of coolant breakdown. This is when you're going to want to change your coolant system regardless. 22,000 miles is a general rule of thumb for a brand new chain. Changing your coolant, you can flush that out. You pull the hose or the plug off, flush it out with distilled water, drain it again, and then top it off with good coolant. Buy a new cap, new pressure cap. You should always, anytime you do a complete system flush, go ahead and change that cap. It's only a few dollars. So you can do that yourself. Now the next one is a big one, and that's something you probably will need to take it to the dealership, and that's checking the valve clearance. Now that's where you got to pull the top cylinder head off the engine. If you don't have the particular tools and the filler gauges for that, definitely take it to a qualified mechanic, and it says to do that every 15,000 miles. Air suction system. That says to check it every 7,600 miles. And that's part of the emission system as well. Again, something I probably won't have to worry about. That's going to be all the little vacuum lines and suction hoses that come off the airbox and go to the cylinder heads. Again, every time you go in to change that air filter, your hoses are there. Squeeze them, rub them, make sure they're not dry, rot, and deteriorating, not leaving black residue on your hands, and you're good to go. If you do find one that's tore or broke, looks like it's starting to get weak or brittle, go ahead and change it out. Any auto parts store will have a replacement for you. Just take one of the hoses with you and say, I need 5 feet of it. It's super cheap and you can fix it yourself. Clutch operation, play engagement and disengagement. Now, for an adjustable clutch, you'll want to make sure your little dial has the proper amount of slack, and you can actually see where it connects to the linkage down on the engine. And there's a certain amount of pull. It varies by manufacturer on the bike, and the spec is listed in the manual. You pull your clutch in, measure it down at the lever onto the crankcase in the gearbox. Make sure it's pulling enough. If it isn't, you can adjust this dial here, and a lot of bikes also have adjustment down at the bottom. Super simple, not a big deal. That says it's something you check every 6 months yourself. Engine oil. Now this is going to be a big one that a lot of people are kind of torn between and have their own opinions, and that's fine. A lot of people will say use pure dyno conventional oil. People will say use pure synthetic oil. Change every 3,000 miles, every 1,500 miles. Some people tell you to put really expensive Amsoil or Redline in and change it every 7,000 to 10,000 miles. Kawasaki says to change your oil after the first service at 600 miles, every 7,000 miles thereafter, or minimum once a year. I change mine every year and every 5,000 miles. That's my personal preference. I use Motul Full Synthetic, the 300V. That's what I've used for a long time in different bikes. I like the way that on the bikes that share the same oil with the gearbox, you got a lot smoother shifts, less false neutrals. That's my personal experience. If you have a particular brand, Rotella, Mobile One, Redline, Amsoil, or the more expensive brands, you know, the race brands, Repsol, whatever, hey, that's all up to you. Personally, I'm a Motul guy, and that's what I use. Besides, it's Kawasaki green, come on now. Do that every 7,000 miles. It says I do mine at 5,000 or once a year. I change every year regardless before riding season. We get some cold winters and I just don't like riding in the cold. So I usually put the maintainer on my battery and put the bike on the stands and change the oil at the beginning of the season before I ride. And also put stabilizer in the fuel tank, but that's another story. Wheels and tires, it says check that every year. You need to check those before you ride every single day. I don't know why it's saying only once a year, but yeah, check your tires. 2 weeks ago, I found a small little piece of metal shrapnel in my front tire. Luckily, it didn't penetrate anything and it was just barely stuck in, just barely stuck in. But when I first saw it, I panicked. Thought I had ruined the front tire, but luckily it was not enough to cause concern, other than the initial discovery of it. So check those tires every day. Wheel bearing damage, it says dealership needs to check that once a year. You can check that yourself if you have a triple tree stand and a rear stand. Put the bike up, and it's super easy to do. It's just like, same for an automobile, wheel bearings are really easy to check, quick and simple. Grab the wheel and try to turn it top to bottom, just like that. Grab the bottom of the tire, the top of the tire, and see if it'll wiggle back and forth. If it does, you need to take the bike in for service and get new wheel bearings. You should have zero play with the wheel doing this. It should be perfectly rigid. Now, I'm not talking about pivoting this way, but grab the tire and try to turn it unnaturally. If you have any play whatsoever, bad wheel bearing. Drive chain lubrication and condition. Personally, I depending on road conditions. I was riding earlier in the winter. We were having crazy weather, warm day, cold day. So warm days I was going out and riding, then it would snow over the weekend. There was salt in the roads. So I was probably cleaning and re-lubricating my chain every 200 to 300 miles just to get the salt and slag out of it. Here's the video for that if you want to see how to get road grime out of your chain. Super easy. Rear wheel stand is not a requirement, but makes it super fast. Other than that, I probably lubricate my chain every 400 to 500 miles. Again, it depends on riding in the weather, wet weather, which I try not to do. It's raining now. So yeah, just make sure your chain stays nice and lubricated and do it accordingly. It really varies on your riding. Drive chain slack. Check it every 600 miles. I check mine every time I lube the chain. It's super easy to do. Take a tape measure, put the bike on the side stand, roll it forward slightly until all the slack is on the bottom. Tape measure to the bottom of the swing arm. Push the chain up. You should have between 20 to 30 millimeters in chain slack, or that's anywhere from 3/4 to just under an inch and a quarter. I try to aim around 1 inch in tire slack. I'll do a video on that shortly. The reason being is I'm probably going to put a sprocket and chain kit on this bike before too long. So stay tuned for that upcoming video. We'll show you how to change sprockets, the chain, and check slack, tension, and wheel alignment. That's something you can do very easily. Drive chain wear. It says dealership needs to check that every 7,600 miles or once a year. And also drive chain guide wear. Take the side covers off the chain. I did that in the cleaning your chain video. Pop those covers off. If you see anywhere that looks like the chain has contacted the metal outside of the sprockets or contacted the guides, if it looks like you've got divots wore in it, order you a new set and bolt them in. They literally unbolt and bolt right back in. You can do that yourself. Brake system. Now with this having an ABS system, that may be something you want to have checked by the dealer. It says to do that every 6 months, at minimum once a year. This is my first ABS bike. I've not experienced any problems with it. I know it's a little sensitive on the back brake on the ABS. It took a little getting used to, but I'm not exactly sure how to adjust that, so that's probably something I will have my mechanic, the guys at Superbike Unlimited, to look at when the time comes. Let's see, brake fluid level. Again, I check that every time I ride. It's easy to check. Right here's your brake. Right there's your brake fluid reservoir. Check that little sight glass right here in the front. Super simple. Brake fluid, front and rear. Need to change that out by the dealership every 2 years. If you've ever done a car, you can do a motorcycle. Basically, you go back here and take a bleed line off. Give it some pumps, squirt the fluid out, put the new fluid in, attach your little bleeder valve that you can get at any auto parts store for about $7, and sit here and pump this bad boy until you squirt all the air out of the back. Turn the screw to tighten it down, put this cover back on, and you're done. You can find plenty of videos online that will show you how to do that, and a lot of the clutch mechanisms that are not mechanical on some of the bigger bikes, basically the same way. You just open the valve, bleed them out, close the valve, fill it, open the valve, attach the thing, and pump it out. Brake hoses, change them out every 4 years. Again, that's going to be whether or not you keep the bike outside, you do a lot of summertime riding or high temperature. Sun damage is going to lead to premature brake wear more than anything for the hoses. You can generally spot those with your eyes. Pump your brakes. If you see any swelling at all in the brake lines or they look like they're about to crack, change them. Brake line switch operation. Okay. Pull your brake lever, make sure your make sure your rear brake light comes on. Press the foot switch, make sure the rear brake light comes on. Newer bikes have LEDs, typically you don't have to worry about blowing bulbs in those. If anything, it'll be a bad fuse or a loose wire connection at the worst. Suspension system. Now, that is something I do recommend. It says the dealership needs to check this once a year. Now, basically what they'll do is get on the bike and bounce up and down. Yep, chocks are good. You know, that's fine and dandy, but that guy may weigh half of what you do or twice of what you do. There are several videos out where you can look to see how to adjust the suspension on the bike. This Kawasaki comes with a very basic shock adjustment tool in the toolkit, and it's a pain to get to on this bike because the adjustment is way up in here. You can take some of the side covers off and get to it. That's something you need to learn how to do with two people. And basically you sit on the bike and then get off the bike, and you want to see how much compression is. It's sag. What you'll see, sag adjustment. Do a search for sag adjustment, and that'll show you how to check your suspension. If you're having trouble getting it dialed in, your shocks may be worn out. If the bike feels like it's floating as you're driving down the road, you're too soft on your suspension, and either the shock is adjusted all the way down or it's time for a new one. And if it is time for a new one, you need to take it in and change it. That's something that even I wouldn't want to do myself, just because I don't have the right tools to do it. The forks also is something that I've never done myself. That's something that you'll want to take into a mechanic or dealership to check the front suspension. Lubrication of rear suspension. Perform that every 15,000 miles. That is not hard to do whatsoever. If you have a little pump hand grease gun, you pop that onto the zerks and pump it with the right kind of high temp bearing grease, and you're good to go. Steering plate. It's pretty easy to check on a bike. You should have zero wobble. If you do, then you'll probably need the new bearing that goes through this collar. If you feel any loose play whatsoever forward to back on the bike, you need new fork bearing, or not fork bearing, but new steering tube bearing. Steering stem bearing lubrication. Perform that every 2 years. And there should be a little zerk fitting on this here where you can grease it. It's around the front on this bike. I guess they did that for aesthetics. So you'll have to pull this cap off to get to the zerk to actually pump grease into there. Do that every 2 years. It says at the dealership needs to perform that. You can do that yourself as well. Check your electrical system every year by the dealership. Well, basically all they're going to do is go through and make sure your turn signals, headlights, the horn. If everything's working on the bike, you just check your electrical system. So don't let them talk you into that. Spark plugs, part of the emission system, change every 7,000 miles by the dealership. Again, if you can remove the air box, do that. Watch that video. You can change your own coil packs and plugs. Once you get the tank and the air box off, the plugs come off the coil packs and they just pull straight out. If you keep the bike in, again, depending on what kind of weather and climate, they can get a little corroded or dry rotted. The rubber boots can and deteriorate. If you experience that, buy brand new packs to go on the plugs. They're way down in the cylinder heads too, so you'll need a long extension to get those out. Chassis parts, lubricate every year or 7,000 miles. Now that's going to be anything that moves down here in the suspension. That's also going to be your brake levers, your side stand, the clutch lever down below, you want foot pegs, anything that moves and makes metal to metal contact, and you lubricate that with your standard motor oil. You don't want to use a heavy grease. You want to use something that's not too heavy, because you don't want it to collect dirt and grime and cause grit to wear out the components. Condition of bolts, nuts, and fasteners. Again, that's going to be whether or not you keep your bike stored indoor or out. If you keep it outside, you're probably going to have some rust and things like that. and that says for the dealership to check that every year. But there you go. That's basically what they say is required of the scheduled maintenance on this bike. So a lot of it is put in here just to cover themselves to say, yep, we checked it. Like checking the bolts and things like that. You can go around and check the torque, engine bolts, engine mounts. When I changed frame sliders, I kept a check on those at least once a week for the first 2 months probably. I just put my torque wrench on there and made sure they were where they needed to be. I recommend you guys do the same thing. If you ever change out the frame sliders, keep an eye on your torque for your engine mounts. It's very important. Proper torque on those will reduce how much engine vibration, which these bikes with the parallel twins are notorious for that. So keeping that torque correct is going to reduce that. But guys, coming up in the future, I will be doing actual hands-on how-to service on these bikes. So keep in touch with my channel for that. Probably, like I said, the next thing I'll be doing is the chain adjustment, sprocket change. It's really simple to do. You just need a rear wheel stand that will help you out with that. Take the guards off, unhook all the brake system and the calipers, pull that rear wheel and change the sprocket. It's like 5 bolts. So, thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave it below. I'll post up these specs for the Kawasaki on my website at Tremonte.tv in the next day or so. So if you want to see what the actual recommended service is, you can have that for a reference. I don't think they have them on their website, so I'll put it on mine. Take care, guys, and ride safe. Until the next sunny day, we'll see you.